and realize what's really going on. So I'm interviewing, I have about 25 people I've been interviewing that are in the Secret Space Program. And I bring them together on the same show. And sometimes they're just going, oh, my God. And as somebody says something, the other person gets activated and they remember something. So it's really a phenomenal experience.
It's like this is a good example, I think, Janet, and that is since I was the director of the Data and Photo Control Department at the Lunar Receiving Laboratory, and I was told to throw away all but one set of all the pictures and films and documents that I had, and I kind of protested a lot. The guy that my director, ILC company there, told me I had to do it, and I said, well, why don't we donate them to some of the universities places that we've been working with? And he said, no, get rid of all but one. So, and he said that finally I bugged him down, and he finally said, I don't care what you do, just get rid of all but one set. And I said, okay. So I put one set in the big filing cabinets. The other set I put into a duffel bag that I took out to my car that night when I had to work a second shift. And not being able to prove that event stuff happened comes down the line that here, my folks forgive me, but I have auto accidents and I have a dropout. I'm trying to think of the name of the woman who was looking in the trash there at the Lunar Receiving Lab and found a bunch of the pictures, and she pulled them out and kept them.
Now, here's another clue, Ken. I know when you were walking on the moon, I was in the got to go in the control room before we started, but the night that they were walking on the moon, and my husband was in charge of the typing pool for NASA, not Grumman, not TRW. You understand what I'm saying? The only typing pool, and my husband was the boss or the supervisor. All the girls behind the typewriters, folks, we didn't have computers at that extent. And he called me up from where we were living in Red Bluff and zoomed over in my Jag XKE convertible that night and got to go up in there and listen to I didn't understand what he wanted, because it was the reason he wanted me to hear this, folks, is they were talking about UFOs, okay? And he was told to delete it, but he snuck a call for me. And now, to this day, knowing my husband and how we are, and with clearances and all that stuff, but nobody told us about that stuff. We were kids and put in hard copy, and we were right out of high school, and he just happened to have 5 scholarships, and it was to keep him out of the Vietnam War. But this is only one incident in 3D now. This is not made up, and I could swear on a Bible what I heard, what he did. He let me hear it, and I said, why do you let me listen to it? All the women were sitting there with their eyes that were working on that shift. I think they had extra pay and all that. But I knew something happened, but, I was like 16 years old. I looked very mature for my age, but I already had ET involvement. So he knew I was connected psychically, and he was always impressed with my psychic abilities and my belief in extraterrestrials, angels for Christians, if you will, extraterrestrials, or other beings, if you will. So when I heard what they said, and they're talking, he had to tell me they're talking about flying saucers, and then I'll put the headset back on and listen one more time very intently. But at first, it was just like, what it sounded like. Remember, Ken, what it sounded like between, I guess, in the control room. I used to know every names, but it back and forth, it would be, it's just, and so it doesn't. It's not very impressive, but I was called up and I got to hear, and so here's the kicker. They told him, Steve and Lee Parrish, to get rid of that. They had to get rid of it. They're the transcribing and listening to tapes and transcribing, and they had to get rid of. It's like I couldn't believe it. So that it was taped and the transcribing, and they were typing it up.
I think a good example.
You were told to get rid of parts 2.
Well, in part 1, for instance, Neil Armstrong requested the channel to the medical officer at the Mission Control Center, and it was at that point where the director at the Mission Control, he switched everybody else in the room off and just left the one channel open for talking to the medical officer and to the mission director. And it's when Neil says, they're here, they're on the edge of the crater, they're watching us. And this was recorded. Now, the good part about it is we had some ham radio operators around the world, some of them that were actually tuned in on the right frequency, and they had recorded the same thing. So that got kind of proved way down the line, but it's been shut down so many times, it's made it difficult for those of us that were close to it or involved in it and have firsthand information of it to prove that what we're saying is true. And so we can actually get those that, well, that's the problem. I've outlived most all of them. You called us old folks. I got to throw this in real quick. I may be 77, but then again, I'm going to live to 180, so that still makes me fairly young, okay? So I'm not going to reprogram my brain. You don't want to program your body and your brain that it says, okay, I'm 68, I'm going to die. Well, you will. So I didn't play that game. I'm playing my game.
Well, that's good.
Right.
And we're going to have shows on that. We're going to have Ira Pastor with BioQuark. He wants to come and talk about longevity. He's got videos and all kinds of things. So we'll get Ira Pastor to talk about that.
Oh, yeah.
And, of course, people like The Secret. And, there's all kinds of things you can use out there. But, yes, we are in charge of what comes out of our mouth and what program. And then I want to talk about the Akashic field and going through it and death and dying, but we can do that another day. But today it has a part of that. Go ahead.
You promised you were going to tell the story about how you ended up in the bottom of the clothes basket, and I'm reminding you, you've got to finish that.
Okay, Ken, missing time.
Yep.
Go ahead. What happened to that?
Okay. Well, about the same time, we had tremendous thunderstorms going on in the panhandle of Texas, out where we lived with the stepdad, T.C. Ray, and our neighbor was about a mile and a half away, closest neighbor, called, and by the way, we even had a phone that hung on the wall. It had the little mouthpiece in the box and a crank on the side, and we cranked it, and the woman that was handling the building where she'd take the little cables and punch in from one and take your cable and punch into the other. So that's how we got the message from the neighbor. He said, boy, there was some lightning struck just out past your house on the other side of the road. It was tremendous. Did you guys see it? And so my brother, who was 5 years older than me, A.R., Dr. A.R. Johnston, I mentioned earlier, and my brother Jimmy, only 17 months old, we grabbed our galoshes and went up across the dirty, muddy road through the barbed wire fence and went about 50 yards into the field of maize, grain. And in that area, it was swirled down at what we can now call crop circles, but that then was, good grief, we were talking about 1947, maybe 1948. Anyway, when you're the littlest one of the group, you've got to do everything you can to keep up with the big one. Well, A.R. is the oldest, so he doesn't have to do anything. He's just going to take his time. And Jimmy, on the other hand, he wasn't interested in chasing. So I outran him, and I got to the circle area first. And on the far side, this all ties together, so give me time here. On the other side of the circle area was this big bird. And nowadays I know it was a whooping crane. At least that's what I thought it was. And it's standing over there. They can stand up to 4 feet tall, mind you. They're still alive today, these birds. It turned its head, looked at me, turned its head back forward, took about 3 steps, opened its wing, flapped its wings once, went up and poof, disappeared. Now, during the regression, as I told this to Dr. Lesson, he said, he had me, he says, go back and look at the bird, see what it's doing. Look at its feathers. What can you see? And I said, it like the zipper dropped the covering, and it was this gray-looking little kid, and it took 2 steps and beamed up, zapped up. So that was when I was only like 6 years old, if that was 5 or 6 years old. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of my first contact. Now, you asked about the clothes hamper. There were other dreams.
The clothes hamper?
I'm getting there. There are times between that and the next 4 years where I would find in sleeping and stuff, always dreaming about other planets, other things going on, other beings, and different things like that. And then the same type of thing happened when we'd moved into the town. 560 people. This is a town, I want you to know. Hart, H-A-R-T, Hart, Texas, because the family of Hart, Mr. and Mrs. Hart, and Mr. and Mrs. Ray, the one that founded the whole town. At any rate, we were, that one evening, there was a big horns, a bunch of ruckus going on. We went out and looked behind our house there, close to, about a half a block away from the grade school, middle school, high school. We didn't have it all one school for that little town. And this craft had landed in this big wide open field between us and the closest elevators. And people had come in with their cars, had hovered around. And so we all went out the back of the house, probably about a football field away from our house. And the doors opened, a ramp came down, and it gets back to the dirty clothes hamper. Anyway, this big, tall guy walks down the ramp, and there's a shimmering-looking curtain or screen surrounding this craft and where they were. And these people panicked. They took off and ran as fast as they could, and there were just a few people left. And this guy looks over, points at me, curled his finger, and said, "Come over." As I walked over, there was a shimmering of the curtain, parted, and allowed me to walk in, and he motioned me to go up the ramp. I walked up the top, and at the top, inside the craft, there were other people, beings, things, leaning over, and they all started applauding, welcoming me in. Then after that, there was a period of time. So after that happened is when I wound up finding myself inside the dirty clothes hamper. So I had been abducted, whatever term you want to use, taken away, trained. That's where a lot of my training came to prepare me to be a solar system ambassador. Now, you mentioned that term earlier. You're aware that NASA had a program called Solar System Ambassadors? Did you know that, TJ?
I heard it from you.
Okay, well, I have my badges, and I copied them. They're on my website that I had from NASA for the Solar System Ambassadors, and we were the ones that would go out to all the different organizations, clubs, and schools and things, and give lectures and talks about what all we were accomplishing in space and all that. Well, that was what I was being trained to be by extraterrestrials, and then I was put back into my timeline. And anytime they take you out, and I'm just talking like this because I know it happened, because it did. Anytime they're taking you out and they put you back in, there could be a gap in a few hours or just a few minutes to put you back in the timeline where you were when you were taken. So here I find myself back in the timeline in the family bathroom, one bathroom in the houses in those days, and in the little door that opens up and a little flip where we'd throw all of their dirty clothes in there and be sorted out and laundered later. In fact, we didn't have washing machines and things like that. We went to the local laundromat, worse than that. And here I am underneath all of those things, and I could hear Mother and them hollering for me, looking for me, and they came into the bathroom. That's about the time I opened the door and came out of it. So that kind of tied it all together to get me up to the point of where I was getting a little bit older, accepting duties and jobs and responsibilities. And then there's a whole lot of other events that I've been able to pull out of this old brain of mine, or I should say young brain, that Dr. Lesson's been able to pull out and find out just exactly what took place other times in my life. So that's kind of what put me.
That's great.
I think the thing is, we've been chosen, and I know that TJ, you and Janet and Karen and Brett and Andrew, and for hours you could name off those that we've come in contact with that have helped validate events and things that took place in our life, that we've been chosen by extraterrestrials. In fact, that's the picked name I have of my book number 3 is Traveling with Extraterrestrials. So you're going to find out a whole lot more as it comes out of the story and we get it out to the public.
Well, let me add another piece to this story, Ken.
Oh, my God. So I'm going to say that because as soon as we start getting information out, other people who were involved that we didn't know at the time, now we're finding out we were all involved in it together at the same time. Now, what happened?
These men in black might have been CIA when I was young because I wanted to go to Washington. But here's the deal. Even I don't know who some of these men in black were because they would surround me. They surrounded President Reagan when I met him, but I was very young. And then when I had this in my mind and I skipped channels, the men in black would come up and they could direct me in life. That's where I was going with it. There's the Mandela effect, Nelson Mandela effect, and conferences and people meeting each other and wanting to know the truth. But what I want to do is have people understand this is very complicated. This isn't just nuts and bolts,